I was 23 years old when I learned that some men refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep you dig their graves, no matter how many prayers you whisper over the turned earth, no matter how much weight you pile upon the wooden nails that separate the living from the dead. My name is Thomas Farrow, and in the summer of 1872, I was the undertaker's assistant in a wind-beaten mining settlement called Redemption, tucked deep into the red rock country of southern Utah Territory, where the sun burned white and merciless, and the shadows fell like judgment across the alkali flats. The town had no more than 200 souls at its peak, most of them drawn by rumors of silver veins running through the Tushar Mountains like frozen rivers of fortune, glittering promises whispered in saloons from San Francisco to St. Louis. What they found instead was dust that worked its way into every crevice of skin and lung, heat that could crack a man's lips in an hour, and blister paint from wooden buildings, and isolation so complete it felt like God himself had turned his back on the place and left us to our own devices and our own devils. I came to Redemption because my father died of consumption in St. Louis, and my mother remarried a man who made it abundantly clear there was no room for me in his orderly house or his orderly life. The undertaker, a gaunt man named Silas Crow, hired me for room, board, and $1 a week. It was honest work, if lonely. I measured the dead with cloth tape, selected boards from the lumber pile, hammered nails with a rhythm that became a kind of prayer. In Redemption, death came often enough to keep me busy. Men fell in the mines when tunnels collapsed. Fevers swept through in summer. Disputes ended with gunfire in the street. But the death that changed everything was Sheriff Dalton Hayes. Hayes was not a kind man. He was respected in the way a rattlesnake is respected. You gave him wide berth. You kept your hands visible, and you never, ever crossed him. He had been sheriff for 6 years, appointed after the previous lawman was found hanging from a cottonwood tree. Hayes was tall, raw-boned, with eyes the color of dirty ice, and a voice like gravel being dragged across iron. He wore a long black coat even in summer, and carried a Colt revolver on each hip. I had seen him kill 3 men in my 2 years in Redemption. When he died, it was sudden and strange. He collapsed outside the assay office on a Wednesday morning in late July, clutching his chest, his face gone the color of ash. By the time Dr. Brennan arrived, Hayes was already dead, his eyes open and staring at the merciless blue sky. Brennan said it was his heart, but there were whispers. Old Mexican prospectors crossed themselves and muttered about El Ojo, the evil eye. A Paiute woman who sold herbs in the market said Hayes had been cursed, that the spirits of those he had wronged had finally claimed him. Silas Crow and I prepared the body that same afternoon. We carried Hayes to the undertaking parlor, a low adobe building that smelled of pine resin and lye soap. I had handled many corpses by then, but Hayes was different. Even in death, he seemed to radiate something cold and unyielding. His skin was colder than it should have been, as if he had been packed in ice. His eyes would not stay closed. 3 times I pressed the lids down, and 3 times they drifted open again, revealing those pale, accusing eyes. Finally, Silas placed copper pennies on them, muttering under his breath. We dressed him in his black coat and laid him in the coffin I had built that morning. It was simple pine, unvarnished with iron handles. As we positioned him, His hand fell from his chest, and I saw something I had missed before. A small leather pouch tied to his belt, stained dark with what looked like blood. Silas saw it too, and his face went pale. "Leave it," he said quickly. "Don't touch it. Nothing good." "Nail the lid down and be done with it." I did as I was told, though my hands shook as I hammered the nails. Each strike seemed too loud, echoing in the small room like a heartbeat. When the last nail was driven, Silas blessed himself and left without another word. I stayed behind to clean the tools, trying to ignore the way the shadows seemed to gather around the coffin as the sun lowered. The funeral was held the next morning. Half the town attended, not out of love but out of obligation and perhaps a hidden relief. Reverend Blackwell read from the book of Job and spoke of judgment and mercy, though his words rang hollow. We carried the coffin to the cemetery on the edge of town, a desolate plot marked by wooden crosses leaning in the wind. I helped lower Hayes into the grave, 6 feet deep in the red clay earth. As the first shovelful of dirt struck the coffin, I felt a shiver run through me. The sound was wrong somehow, too hollow, too final. By sunset, the grave was filled and mounded. I patted the earth down with the flat of the shovel, placed a temporary wooden marker at the head, and walked back to town as the sky turned the color of blood and bruises. That night I could not sleep. The heat was suffocating. I lay on my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, then another, then silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums like hands. And then came the knocking, 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door downstairs. I sat up, my heart suddenly hammering. It was past midnight. No one came calling at such an hour unless there was death or emergency. I lit a candle and pulled on my clothes, then descended the narrow staircase. The knocking came again, patient and insistent. "Who's there?" I called, my voice unsteady. No answer, just silence. I unlatched the door and pulled it open. The street was empty, bathed in pale moonlight. The wind had died completely, leaving the air still and heavy. I stepped outside, looking left and right, but saw no one. Then I looked down. On the threshold, pressed into the dust, was a single boot print, large, distinct, the kind left by a man's heavy work boot, and it was fresh, the edges sharp, the impression deep. I knelt down, my candle trembling in my hand, and felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The print led away from the door, across the street, and toward the cemetery. I followed it. I do not know why. The prints were evenly spaced, unhurried, leading through the empty streets and out past the last buildings to the graveyard. My candle flickered. The moon was a thin crescent offering little light. The wooden crosses cast long skeletal shadows. I found the boot prints leading directly to Hayes's grave, and the grave was open, not disturbed, not dug up by animals or vandals. Open. The earth had been pushed aside from within, forming a mound around the edges of the hole. The coffin lid lay splintered on the ground, nails pulled free, wood cracked as if by tremendous force. I approached slowly, my legs weak, my breath coming in short gasps. I held the candle over the grave and looked down. It was empty. The coffin was there, broken and vacant. The black coat was gone. The body was gone. Only the copper pennies remained, lying on the white satin lining like accusing eyes. I ran back to town, my candle extinguished, stumbling in the dark, my mind a riot of terror and disbelief. I reached the parlor and slammed the door behind me, throwing the bolt, dragging a heavy table in front of it. I climbed the stairs to my room and barricaded myself inside. I sat on my bed, shaking, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all. But then came the knocking again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, this time on my door. "Thomas," came a voice from the other side, low, rough, unmistakable. "Let me in." It was Sheriff Hayes. I pressed myself against the wall, unable to breathe. The voice came again, patient and cold. "I know you can hear me, Thomas. Open the door. We have business to settle." "You're dead," I whispered. "I buried you." A long silence, then a sound like laughter, dry and bitter. "Dead, yes, but not finished. Not yet. There are debts to be paid, Thomas, accounts to balance, and you helped put me in the ground before my work was done." I did not answer. The furniture scraped against the floor as something pushed from the other side. The door shook in its frame. I grabbed the small knife I used for carving and held it with both hands, though I knew it would be useless. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The scraping ceased. Silence returned, thick and oppressive. I waited, frozen, for what felt like hours. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn crept through the shutters, I dared to move the furniture and open the door. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, just outside my door, lay a single copper penny. Dirt still clung to it. I fled redemption that morning. I threw my few belongings into a satchel and took the first wagon heading east. The driver asked no questions when he saw my face. I told no one what I had seen. Who would believe me? But the story followed me. In the years since, I have heard rumors from travelers passing through Utah territory. They speak of a figure in a long black coat who walks the streets of redemption at night, knocking on doors, settling old scores. They say men who wronged Sheriff Hayes in life have disappeared, their homes found empty, their beds unslept in. They say the grave remains open, waiting, and that no one in redemption will go near the cemetery after dark. I do not know if any of it is true. I only know what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. I know that I buried Sheriff Dalton Hayes in the red earth of Utah in the summer of 1872, and I know that he came back. Some men, it seems, carry their duty beyond death. Some men refuse to rest until every debt is paid, every wrong avenged, every account balanced. And some graves, no matter how deep you dig them, are only temporary. I am an old man now, far from redemption, far from the dust and heat and wind. But on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the air is still, I wake in darkness and listen, and sometimes, very faintly, I hear it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks,